Welcome everyone. Today we're going to talk about the Reese Motivational Profile and more specifically how it is positioned with other profiles. So my name is Jonathan Peters, and normally at this point I might talk about myself and what I've accomplished and why you should listen to me, but I want to assure you by the end of this short little video, you're going to learn more about me than if I just sat here and bragged about myself for a little bit. All right, so let's get started. I want to go all the way back to caveman days. As we developed language, we began to interpret what was going on around us. We began to define our environment, and more specifically, we began to share with others our knowledge. So we would say, here's what I learned when I did this, this happened. And so what we were able to do is to categorize everything that was in this vast world of ours. So we could say, that is a tree, that is a rock, that is a mountain, that is a desert. And inside of this, we also started to categorize threats. So we would say that is a saber-toothed tiger, that is dangerous. To protect us, we said all saber-toothed tigers are dangerous, or all tigers are dangerous. And we would teach it to our children because we didn't want our children to say, ooh, nice kitty, or our intellectual brains to sit there and say, well, wait a minute, that was a bad saber-toothed tiger. This one might not be bad. All right, we just said all saber-toothed tigers are bad. All of these berries are poisonous. All of fire will burn you, and so on. And so we get to create these categories. And then we also noticed inside of our tribe that there were some differences. So, well, first of all, there's some anatomical differences. Those people over there look different than those people over there, at least anatomically. We set them up as categories. We said, that's a man, that's a woman. And then inside the tribe, we had different roles that we played. And so we said, women do these roles, men do these roles. We're generalizing inside of our categories. The problem is not all women behave the same, not all men behave the same, but we still tried to keep people inside of those categories. We had different categories as well. That man over there is very, very old. This little guy over here is very, very young. And so we also had different generations. And then we went a step further and we said that those people over there are different than us, because we were tribal and we fought with other tribes for resources. And so we said, well, they look different than us. They have a different language than us. They maybe decorate their bodies differently than us, and so on. So we began to categorize and generalize about people. The problem is people don't fit nicely into categories. Not all of those people in that tribe are mean, bad, or whatever. And we also began to look at our environment, and at night we would lay up and look at the stars and begin to wonder why those stars were moving. And what we noticed was when the stars were in certain parts of the sky, certain things would happen. It might be getting colder, it might be getting warmer. The days are longer and shorter, and so on. So we placed a lot of emphasis on what was happening in the sky. Well, return back to the tribe, we were still trying to categorize people and their differences. And what we noticed is that if people are born in a certain month, they tended to have certain characteristics. And so that's where we came up with the astrology. Said people who are born in this month act like a bull. People who are born in this month are fishy like fish, whatever, or like crabs in this month. And so we began to categorize people according to the month that they were born in. Similarly, over in China, they did it by the year. By the year, they would say everybody born in this year is like a rat. Everybody born in this year is like a tiger. Well, the problem is that's a lot of people that you're trying to categorize. And so it didn't quite work out in either system. Not everybody born in one month was exactly the same. And so then we had to account for this by saying, well, there's rising suns and setting suns and things in retrograde and so on. Or in the Chinese system, we had metals and colors. So I'm a red iron horse, for instance. You might be born the same month as me and you'd be a blue wood horse or whatever. Okay, so even inside of our categories, people still didn't fit. Well, this went along for a little while, and then this guy came along called Hippocrates Hippocrates, being an ancient Greek, was really into squares. Squares, all sides are equal, the angles are all equal. 4 inside of a square is magical. He said instead of looking out to the stars, because who cares about the stars, man are the top of creation, if you will. And so everything we need to know is within inside of us. And so instead of looking to the stars, what he did is he categorized people according to 4 body fluids, right? He had blood, phlegm, and black and yellow bile. And his theory was that when people are high in phlegm, let's say, they have these characteristics. If they're low in yellow bile, they'll have these characteristics. And so he started to categorize people according to body fluids, which nicely lined up with the 4 elements. Aristotle came along. He wasn't too sure about all the body stuff, but he perpetuated the idea that humans can be divided into 4 categories. So again, this is ancient Greek. In China, we had a little different system, the I Ching, hugely more complex and complicated, but still fitting inside of a math, if you will, that made sense. So move several centuries ahead, and you get this guy named Carl Jung. At the beginning of the 20th century, Carl Jung theorized that there was this thing called the supra-consciousness that we're all part of, something that is greater than our individual consciousnesses. And so he went back and he looked at this thing called archetypes. And so there were these different archetypes, and he resurrected this concept of the 4 personality styles based on different characteristics. Catherine Briggs was a student of Carl's, and so she was very taken by this, and so she and her daughter created a system of questions that would place somebody into one of these categories, one of these 4 categories. And so they came out with this in 1954, and it didn't really catch on. The Jungian and his mysticism and this whole thing of archetypes and everything wasn't really popular at the time. It wasn't until the late 70s into the early 80s with the New Age movement, Carl Jung's theories came back into vogue. Guys like Joseph Campbell became very, very popular. And so this concept of archetypes and this mysticism that all people are part of came back into vogue. And so we had the Myers-Briggs test, the profile, became popular in the early 80s and is still popular today. Now, the problem with the original ones is we're still stuck with these 4. And so for you, it may be easy to say, look at one person and say, well, that one's a melancholic, and that person over there is a choleric, and this one over here is a phlegmatic, and I'm kind of sanguine, but I'm not all in that category, right? Because we don't fit nicely into these boxes. And so what they did is they made it more complicated. Over there on the left, they took the original quadrants and broke each quadrant into quadrants. Some folks went over to the I Ching and adopted their design to explain why we don't fit nicely into these different categories. And different programs came along. You might be familiar with DISC. DISC says, well, you don't fit into one category, but you draw from different categories. So you might be 34 over here, 46 over there, 3 here, and 17 over there. So again, even inside of that, we're still trying to place people into categories. And overall, it seems truthful. It seems right. We're able to look at certain people and say, you know, that guy was born in this certain month and he does act like a bull. He does act like a Taurus. Or we look over here and we say, you know, that person over there does seem to be blood, air, bile, whatever. Or we say that person seems to be a D or an S or a C. We like these categories, but individually we don't fit nicely into them. And of course, the concepts of profiles just kept going. There's tons of different profiles out there. These examples are all from the game and gamification world. So someone might be a killer, an achiever, an explorer. We have different types of players. So things get really, really complicated in a hurry. But what if we did things the other way around? What if instead of generalizing and categorizing people, we approached it from the other direction? And for this, I want to turn to, just briefly, to Simon Sinek in his Golden Circle. Simon says many organizations and people know what they do and how they do it, But he says what we need to do is get to the why. Why do we exist? Because that describes the how and the what. So in other words, why do people fit in these categories? Why is someone 34% dominant or in a certain quadrant? Or why do people born in a certain year or a certain month behave this way? Instead of observing and trying to categorize people, what if we said, why do they fit into this category? Right? And so for this, I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Stephen Rees. Dr. Rees, very active academic, very scholarly. Why do people do what they do? He said, what motivates you? And so with a massive study, it was over 80,000 people on 4 continents. In the responses he got back, there were over 500, quotes, motivators. So people would say, this is why I do this, why I do that. And Dr. Rees whittled that down to a little over 300, right? So he would say, well, these two are similar, so that's one. These two are similar, so that's one. At around 300, that's when he put it into the computer, and the computer ran all these complicated algorithms and came up with 15, what he calls core desires. Now, through scientific argument and some more study, a 16th was added later, has subsequently been added. So since then, there's close to, it says dozens, there's over 2,000 peer-reviewed articles in scientific journals now about the Rees motivational profile. It is used as a predictor of behavior in clinical environments. It's also used by the military, for instance, to determine who is likely to suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome. So very scientific, but it's coming at it from a different way. Because the profile, the Rees motivational profile, suggests why you're in certain categories, okay? Why you communicate this way. The others say how you communicate. The others say what is important to you. The Rees motivational profile says how, it says why creates the how creates the what. So when you take your Rees motivational profile, you'll get something that looks like this. The middle is average. Okay, so where it's yellow there, that's average across now hundreds of thousands of people around the world in every continent except for Antarctica. You're going to be high in 2 or 3 of these. You're going to be low in 2 or 3. So green being the high, red being the low. It's not bad, it just means you're low in that area. So for instance, if we go down to social contact, which is 4th from the bottom, let's say society says 8 hours a day, you'll be in contact with folks. So while you're at work, you'll be in contact with folks. People who are high in this want more than those 8 hours a day. People who are low want less. Okay, so this is what makes you you. And this is ultimately these whys, okay, what are your highs and your lows here, are what manifest themselves into, say, other profiles, or why you do what you do, what the decisions you make, why is this fun, that isn't fun, why is this attractive to you and not that. So each of us has our own profile, and this is what makes us different. You and I might be similar in some of these, but we certainly won't be the same in all of them. Now, quick little caveat here. When you take yours, you are going to be closer to average, right? I am not average, and if you know me at all, you know that to be true. So where you see here is just where I'm very different from, say, the norm. It's not a good or a bad thing. But once you see this and once you understand this, let's say I'm a client of yours, or let's say you're my boss, you now know how to talk to me, how to interact with me. We can look at it on the individual standpoint here, which I highly encourage you to do, because then we can find our blind spots. We can find our blind spots. So for instance, if I'm high expediency, I'm not going to anticipate that you, let's say you're low expedient, that rules are important to you. Tradition is important to you. When someone say, this is the way it's always been done, that's a good thing for you. That's not necessarily something you would fight against. See, on my side, when someone tells me this is the rules, this is the way it has to be, I'm like, why? Right? Why do we have to drive the speed limit? So that's an example of a blind spot. So we have our blind spots. Once we know our blind spots, then we can work with ourselves so that they don't get in the way of us communicating with other people. Now, when we know our team or know our target audience's profile, then we can work with that as well. So there's a lot of possibilities here, but like I said, we want to begin first with you. What are your blind spots? What does your profile look like?